August 20th. I'm Paul Krikorian, Chair of the committee. I'm joined by my colleagues, the Honorable Paul Koretz and the Honorable Mitch Englander, and we're ready to begin with our agenda today. The first item on the agenda is a closed session item. So, and I don't have any cards on that. So we'll go ahead and retire to the other room to complete the closed session item, then we'll come back here. When we return, if anybody would like to provide public comment, please fill out one of these cards, either for general public comment or any of the items that are on our agenda today. Having received none, public comment on item number 1 is closed, and we're going to retire to the other room. All right, we are back now from closed session. Mr. Serrano, do you need to report that?
No.
Okay. That brings us then to items number 2 and 3. I think are suitable to dispose of as consent matters, unless either of you have questions or concerns about either of them.
I agree.
All right, and Mr. Serrano.
That would be fine. If I may request for actually item 3, add a third recommendation, and that would be for us to work with the city controller to expedite the reimbursement for item 3.
Well, and actually, Mr. Kress has a question on number 3, so let's go ahead on number 2 then, and let's approve 2 without objection. Approve the recommendations on number 2, and then that will bring us to number 3.
Okay, item 3 is a CAO report relative to CRA. There's a local authority as overpayment for city oversight services from last fiscal year.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Shafti Amir from the CAO's office. I can go ahead and read out. We have just one additional recommendation we wanted to add. It's a technical instruction per the controller's office, and that is authorize the city controller to work with the CAO's office to expedite the accounting adjustment and refund payment process.
I didn't catch the last part. The door was closing.
Oh, okay. It's authorize the city controller to work with the CAO's office to expedite the accounting adjustment and refund payment process. So that would be the additional recommendation. Okay. And I can go ahead and present the item of the report.
Why don't we just go straight to Mr. Kretz's question, okay, since we've all looked at it. Mr. Kretz.
Yeah, my only question is the CRA doesn't exist any longer, so who is pushing us to refund this, and is there any way for us just to keep the money in the reserve fund and not repay it?
According to the CRA was dissolved per the state legislation, and per the state legislation there's a successor agency which is called, basically for the CRA-LA, it's called a designated local authority, DLA, it's how it's referred to. And the state controller is the one that conducted this audit in the wake of the dissolution and is also instructing the reversal of all the asset transfers which took place during the time period in question, which is January 2011 through January of 2012.
So if we chose to attempt just to keep the money, what would prevent us from doing that? What would the process be?
There is a procedure in place. The dissolution is ongoing currently, and there's no immediate penalty right now. What we have right now is a letter from the state controller which was sent to all cities and counties which were the founding cities for those CRAs. So it's a general letter that states to reverse and outlines all of this reversal process.
Lisa Johnson-Smith, CAO, and I also wanted to add that we have an oversight ordinance with the former CRA that had been in existence for 20 years, and the 4 departments, the CAO, the CLA, the controller, and the city attorney, the past practice had always been that they had reimbursed us for direct costs and overhead. So we would do quarterly billings. So once the dissolution, the legislation was released and then passed, We did advanced billings, and part of our agreement with CRA was that if we would reconcile those billings at the end, and if we were under or over, we would send them a reconciliation, and that's the other reason why we're moving forward with this, requesting approval.
So in essence, it's a routine part of the old process.
Right, because we had always operated on a reimbursement, so in this case, this is really the first time we've ever had to refund, because we've always done it as a reimbursement. And just because what was going on, we wanted to make sure we had our services covered, so we requested advance payments, and they accommodated that request.
So are we recommending that we do this? Is there a way around it is the question.
Yes, we are recommending that we go ahead and refund the payments. I guess that the question becomes, do we want to create a adversarial type relationship? Not that maybe there are already some uncertainties and some things, but we do feel that at this point it is money that they had forwarded to us, and it'd be appropriate for us to reimburse them.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
All right. Then if there's no objection to that,
No
the
objection.
action of the committee will be to approve the recommendations as amended.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to item number 4.
Item 4 was continued from the August 6th meeting, and it's to see a reports relative to costs incurred by the City of Los Angeles for staff salaries, overtime, and other expenses related to the Occupy LA protests pursuant to motion. I do know Public Safety noted and filed a report back on May 11th, and further recommend that council request City Attorney determine if restitution for city costs can be sought from individuals arrested during department sweep of City Hall and campus.
Okay.
Tyler
Good afternoon.
Hall, CAO. This is our third report on these expenses. This latest report simply adds some additional costs from the city attorney that were incurred after the protest occurred and after our initial reports came out. So the new total for the city attorney is $249,346, and the total net cost to the city is about $4.3 million.
Okay. Does this now include all of the costs relating to this issue? Are you satisfied now that this report is now the comprehensive report of all costs?
Yes, in as much as it's all of the costs that have been reported to us by departments. If departments didn't report any costs, then they wouldn't be in here, but we did query all departments, including DWP and the other proprietaries, so it should include all costs, yes.
Okay. Mr. Kretz, anything on this?
Are there any financial lessons to be learned from all of this now that we've done this analysis?
It's expensive to have a protest on the front line.
Other than don't invite a group of protesters to stay as long as they like on the lawn.
Yeah, exactly. Be careful who you invite.
I mean, are there ways we could have handled this in a more cost-effective way without otherwise altering the protest?
Well, about half of the cost, $2,446,000, we would have spent on something, one way or the other, because it was those were budgeted funds for regular salaries. So that leaves the additional costs of $2.2 million. I mean, if there had not been I think it was 2 months, those costs wouldn't have occurred. It's really, I don't know what we could have done other than not have the protest stay as long as it did.
How much of a factor was the amount of time in running up expense? If the protest was a week long instead of 2 months long?
That's a good question, because a lot, if you look at the costs for police, that's a big chunk of the additional costs, 1.4 million for overtime. A lot of that was occurred, it was occurring throughout those 2 months, and a large chunk of it occurred when the protest was removed. So certainly shortening the amount of time that the protest had gone on would have reduced, they wouldn't have needed all that overtime. And that would go for the other departments that had overtime as well, just because they had to do something on an ongoing basis above and beyond their regular hours.
Certainly the big chunk to push the protesters out, if we hadn't changed that strategy, we would have had that same expense whenever we decided to do that, I presume.
I think there would have been, well, I don't know of any, you'd have to ask the police department if they had considered other strategies, but they would still have had to do overtime during the 2 months of the protest to make sure that some level of order was maintained.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Englander.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, the statement, I just want to say that I hear what you're saying when you make the point that, well, we would have spent the other money anyway. I just disagree with the philosophy and the idea when I've got to go back to residents in my district and saying we're going to have less police officers on the street. We're going to have less people in black and whites because they have to be assigned to another role, another duty. It's not a matter of whether we have to spend the money. It's how are we spending the money. The irony here is that the entire protest about the 99%, these are the very folks who are paying for this $5 million. It's $4.7 million is the 99%. It's not the 1%. It's the average person, quite frankly, that can't afford it. And we start looking at all the departments. Department of Aging, their entire annual budget is $3.8 million. Disability is $1.6 million. El Pueblo, $1.5 million. Employee Relations Board is $750,000. Ethics Commission is $2 million. Department of Neighborhood Empowerment is $1.7 million. So you start looking at the total budgets of city departments that are out there to try to improve our community each and every day, and we spent more than any of these departments on supporting, and that's exactly what it was, supporting this protest, which we all agree, I think everybody now agrees that wasn't an issue of First Amendment rights. But without getting into that, I think it's important just to have the numbers and the reports because it really sends the message of for every action or reaction or response, there's a cost consequence. And when we're in dire financial shape right now and cutting programs and slashing services and unable to maintain pools and streets and sidewalks and trees, we've got to look at these dollars. I mean, $5 million is a lot of money. And although this was the political will at the time, the report and the information is important so we know going forward that we might want to say, yes, go ahead and occupy, but we know that there's a cost. And that's why it's critically important to have these numbers and share them publicly. So I appreciate you bringing the numbers forward and working hard to go after all the departments to get the numbers, which I know also in itself wasn't a task. I think we far exceed the $5 million number once we add in your time and going after all the departments. So I appreciate all your work on this.
Thank you, Mr. Englander, and thank you for your persistence as well as chair of our Public Safety Committee in seeing this one through as well. All right, we have a few cards on this item. We're going to start with Patty Berman, followed by Ann Williams. And following Ms. Williams will be Russ Brown, and right now those are the only cards that I have on this matter, so if you'd like to speak, please fill out a card and bring it forward. Ms. Berman.
Thank you. My name is Patty Berman. I am the president of the Downtown Los Angeles Neighborhood Council. I am the secretary of the Pershing Square Park Advisory Board, and I've been a resident of the historic core for almost 12 years. I hear what the residents say because they come to me. The results of this have been, and I hate to say this in front of our council members, but the residents of the historic core feel that they have been let down by the government of this city. We all understand that there are First Amendment rights to be dealt with, but this was not a situation of First Amendment rights. This was a situation of being afraid to tell these people that you are vandals, not people with a protest. It's cost a lot more, I believe, than what you've heard today. I don't know if you got the costs for the cleanup every day at Pershing Square for the last couple of months. It's been horrendous. People have been pulled from other jobs in order to help clean up there. Mr. Englander, I really, really appreciate your comments. It's the first time I've heard anyone from City Council say what those of us who've been living through this believe. Please don't take this lightly, and please don't let it happen again. This is costing so much more than just the dollars. It's cost the faith of the people who believe in their own government. It's cost so much. So please don't let this get swept under the carpet again, and let's never have an incident like this. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Williams.
Good afternoon. I'm Ann Williams with the Central City Association, an association of businesses working to improve downtown Los Angeles for all the 450,000 employees, 50,000 residents, and countless visitors to our city center each day. Today you're talking about the fiscal impact and direct costs to the city that are associated with the encampment at City Hall Park in 2011. But I'm here to let you know that while the large formal encampment may have left the lawn outside this building, there is a smaller group who remains and continues to have a very serious impact on the quality of life in downtown. I've distributed photos of Pershing Square following this month's Art Walk, and these photos dramatically illustrate the chalk graffiti inflicted on our community by people who call themselves protesters. But I ask you, would you ever set foot in this park, much less bring your family there? Contrary to the notion that it's just chalk, this kind of intense chalking often requires pressure washing and a deep scrubber machine to remove. I hope you heard and will remember the voices of a wide variety of community members who spoke at public comment at City Council last month. These were the voices of small businesses, like the independent operators at the farmers market at Pershing Square, who are losing their livelihoods because their customers do not want to run the gauntlet of the encampment that has set up daily in the park for the past several months, and the owner of a restaurant on Spring Street who had to close her doors because of the chalk protesters who disrupted the Art Walk last month. In addition to lost business, the private sector continues to incur direct costs of cleaning up after the protesters, costs like removing trash and the daily washing of chalk graffiti and urine off of private property, as well as public sidewalks and spaces. Downtown's business improvement districts spend hundreds of thousands of dollars annually maintaining the public right-of-way. All of this money is paid by private businesses whose mission is simply to help keep downtown LA clean and safe for all Angelenos to enjoy. In 2012, there are a lot of methods to protest and exercise one's right to free speech, and it's unfortunate that we're still being forced to divert limited resources and manpower to address the negative behavior that we continue to see downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Brown.
Russell Brown. I'm a 10-year resident of downtown. Also been very involved previously with the Downtown Neighborhood Council, historic downtown bid, and I'm chair of the Pershing Square Park Advisory Board. Although we talked about the cost of Occupy LA at City Hall, once it left City Hall, it immediately moved to Pershing Square and the other streets of downtown. On any given day, there are more than 60 Occupy LA and homeless folks in Pershing Square. There's constant chalking, graffiti, vandalism, drug use, drug sales, and fistfights. Indeed, I handed a packet to the clerk that you can see exactly what the freedom of expression in their protest is nothing but vandalism in Pershing Square. The farmers market that was rated the best farmers market in all of downtown now has a 40% drop in business, 30% drop in vendors, and is being cited by the health department for health violations. We have pit bulls on loose chains that are being sent after many of the vendors. We have the farmers market vendors politely trying to ask the Occupy LAers to please restrain their animals and please not be right on top of the vendors, and they spit in their face. We've had film permits abandon the park. We've had our Friday night movies almost have no attendance. We have total blocking of the street as people yelling and screaming. The businesses around there rely on Pershing Square Park to be their sole parking force. They can now not lease buildings because when they take a tour, they're leaving. We're having buildings that are spending significant money to renovate buildings, scared for the first time to even be anywhere near the park. We need your help, and the LAPD and North American Security has until recently not been able to help us in the park, and we're really very, very frustrated, and the cost of this is well in excess of $100,000. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anything further, colleagues? Mr. Kretz?
Well, I don't know whether the Occupy at Pershing Square is really on the agenda, but
Well, it's not, except to the extent that I think we can discuss the fact that it's not included within, that those are additional costs that are not included within the scope of this report. So in that respect, this report does not yet fully capture all of the costs of this ongoing protest, because those costs continue to accrue, as we heard, even at Pershing Square. So if you'd like to make reference to it in that context, I think it's appropriate.
well, honestly, I wasn't aware that this is still an ongoing problem to this magnitude. I'm wondering, and I don't know if it's appropriate to ask this question, whether Public Safety Committee has taken a look at this and whether there's something we can do to get a handle on the problem that's now moved off of City Hall proper and onto other areas where it's causing equal problems and damage. If I can ask, I would ask Mr. Englander if this issue has come before Public Safety yet.
It has not.
Yeah.
In terms of what's going on at Pershing Square, it's been highlighted, it's been in the media, it's been in the press. I've heard certainly from PD and others of the issues, but this very specific idea of what LAPD is doing to address it has not come before, and there's no motions pending right now to ask them to come before the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So the recommendation, I think, is to receive and file, or note and file?
Note and file.
Note and file. Note and file that report. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming to speak on that important topic as well. That brings us to item number 5.
That's correct. Item 5 is a budget motion instructing the Office of Finance and the CAO, with the assistance of the City Attorney and all regulatory permitting city departments, to develop and report with proposal for an ordinance authorizing the revocation or denial of a city regulatory permit issued or requested by business that has any delinquent tax, including business tax.
Afternoon, Robert Lee, Office of Finance.
Todd Bowie, Office of Finance.
At this point, we are at the initial stage of our reviewing process. We've worked with the CAO's office in creating a survey that's been sent out to most of the departments regarding, including this specific topic regarding the revocation and the possibility of revoking certain regulatory permits. What we have on hand already is what we have with CID regarding the fact that if there is a parking occupancy tax and the individual has not paid the business tax liability, that they have the ability to be revoked, and we have that in process. Also with building safety, we have the ability right now through their clearance module of more or less, if they pull a permit, until their business tax liability is taken care of, or if they need to apply for a business tax permit, they are not allowed to pull that permit. So from these two models and templates, we're trying to expand to the other departments that might have something regulatory. We understand that with some departments, due to public safety and whatnot, we don't want to go there. However, at this point, as a result of the survey and our initial review, we'll have a better idea of what might be out there within the different departments and what we can actually possibly address in this format. And the second stage, I guess, is more or less we will start a dialogue with the departments as what their response to the surveys are, and then we'll follow through on that.
Okay. I actually thought we were a little further along in actually getting started and preparing an ordinance that would provide for revocation in the event of a delinquency. Is that not the case?
To the best of my knowledge, it's something.
No, there is no ordinance. I think ultimately what it would mean is we would need ordinances regarding each and every permit or type that we identify through this process. So I don't believe in
blanket
omnibus.
way. It has to be specific to each category of approval.
That's generally the case, yes.
Okay. When will that be ready to come back?
We're getting the feedback from the departments this week, and so we'll start working then with the departments from there in order to start determining where the best opportunities are. It's difficult to say exactly what the exact timeline will be, but I suspect over the course of the next month or so, we'll be able to hone in a little bit better in terms of where we should be looking first here with those departments, and then start working from there with them.
Okay. Colleagues?
Yeah,
Mr. Englander?
something on that was that this is something that's critically important, because while, and I'm constantly telling people I'm absolutely against the gross receipts tax and would love to at some point phase it out and get rid of it, and categorically we keep chopping it down in different places. It's not fair to the ones that are paying to have these folks that are not paying out there, that are deadbeats, that are still operating. In fact, some of them could be doing business with the city. We don't even know with certainty who they are, and they're not always updated on a website for all the city employees and staff to see, and everybody who's perhaps even frequenting these establishments. Going after this, I remember the discussion that we had in the Budget Committee, which is where I believe this came out of in the last budget, was the idea that we could have something in place to revoke permits. Even if we came up with sort of the top 10, whether they're CUPs or whatever those might be, to say, let's start somewhere. I don't know that they have to be all-encompassing, let's make sure we get it all in one fell swoop, versus get something on the books now, have a process. It's always easier to amend and add categories. So the sooner we can come back with something, I think the better, to make sure that we go. Right now, there's no teeth and really no penalty to these businesses that aren't paying the business taxes, other than the fact that we go after them and it's a misdemeanor. I don't know how many we've actually prosecuted, but we need something else to ensure that we go after them and try to revoke permits or get them to comply.
Yes, we agree. We appreciate that approach, that we do focus on the greatest opportunities first, because it will definitely take some time to set up those processes in place, and so we should focus on where the greatest opportunities are.
And I would just add that while I think that the revocation model is probably the most significant step to take initially, I'd also like to see us find other ways that we can offset tax liabilities that are owed. For example, if a business is applying for a tax refund, are there related entities that have a tax debt to us that can be offsetted against? Mr. Englander mentioned the possibility that one of these businesses may actually be doing business with the city. If there are payments due to that business, then certainly they should be offset against tax liabilities that are owed. I don't know if that's possible that under our current system or not, but if it isn't, then I think we certainly should have those tools in our toolkit as well.
We do have a limited intercept program, mostly revolving around accounts payable versus amounts due to the city, primarily for tax accounts. That is through the FMS system. I think expanding that into other realms, we would definitely need to get the support or work with controller and ITA and maybe some other departments as well, to kind of begin identifying how such a technology could be implemented to do that type of intercept on a broader scale.
Thank you. Mr. Kretz.
Do we have any idea how big the scope of the problem is? How many businesses are delinquent? How much money that would add up to?
Well, the premise of it now is, with the revocation, is we are trying to catch them before they even start. For example, like I said, with the police permits and with a POT with building and safety. If anybody wants to pull a permit to work within the city of Los Angeles, whether it be POT or just to do construction, they have to go through us. So we try to catch them before they even get here. But in our active discovery, we are still actively working with Franchise Tax Board and whatnot on discovering entities. But to say what percentage, one of the factors is as each year goes on, new businesses come in. And one of our goals is outreach to make sure they realize they have to have the business license, or even permits. But to say specifically what number, what percentage, it's a little hard to pin down.
So is there a system that's necessary to identify and revoke the permits to those delinquent businesses? How do we actually identify them, catch them, and revoke them?
The existing process with POT
and what you're planning to add to this now?
Well, again, as my associate says, until we have a better idea what permits, regulatory permits, we can pursue and what the limitations are within each department, and discussing between our CAO, not our city attorney and theirs, we won't know exactly what we can do to their system or what they have on their books. So at this point, once we do the analysis and we know what we can tag, and as we say, after we decide maybe what the top 10 are, then after that we'll have to pursue one by one to see exactly what we can do to resolve if there is an issue with that. Yes. As you know, with building and safety, we have the clearance module. If they pull a permit, they have to go through us. If they don't have a business license, they set one up. Until they are cleared on our side, they can't go back to pull a permit. So from that point of view, we have anything that tries to do any business within the city that requires anything within building safety, planning, whatnot, the zoning, they have to go through that.
So it does become difficult and across an entire city where everyone is kind of dealing with their own systems to have a systematic one-size-fits-all kind of approach to it. For instance, like with building and safety, we were able to do some interfacing with them. We do some work with the police department as well, the Commission Investigation Division. So it'll really depend on what are the resources or systems that are in place at the different departments that we deal with, and what are our opportunities or capabilities to interact with those various systems.
And there's also a question for me. I think some of this could be very valuable. I mean, we know there are people in the parking lot operation business for whom not collecting their taxes and then not forwarding them to the city is part of their business model. But on the other hand, there are probably also some businesses that are just legitimately struggling. And so if we take away their permit and they're struggling enough that they can't make good on what they owe in back taxes, we're just putting them out of business. So have we looked at whether that winds up actually saving us money or costing us money?
That would be part of the analysis, because if you think of it, each department has their administrative remedy that they go through the process. So if an individual does have a financial hardship and whatnot, they would bring it up to that point as well. And whether there is the need to do installments or whatnot, there are other opportunities and functions. But until we figure out what are administrative remedies as opposed to the department that we're trying to work with, and the legalities, everything, we can't really do anything.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is by pulling their permit, we're potentially taking away their right to operate. And I think that is a likelihood. And I think that it may have an impact, such as what you indicated. It is difficult to surmise what that offset might be, but at the same time, you know, they got into the delinquent status, and we are trying to obviously shore up. A lot of these process would also require some sort of review process or a board by which you would have to go through.
I think the point I'm making is just that it would require some level of sophistication and subtlety to deal with hardship cases and just not be putting people out of business. Whereas if we were a little more gentle in our handling of it, we might be able to keep them in business and allow them to catch up and pay off their taxes and continue to be tax-paying entities. So I think we have to look at this in a sophisticated way, but I think in general it's desperately needed, and there are some sectors that are just ripping us off blind, which I think the parking sector is probably the worst that we've identified, and hopefully we can get a much better handle on this.
I see that our Inspector General is here. Mr. Campos, do you want to offer any thoughts on this topic of revocation of business licenses?
Absolutely. Fernando Campos with the CAO's office, Inspector General. I think we have an issue of interoperability here that we need to attack. In theory, I agree fundamentally. We do have a system-wide problem in terms of trying to identify payments in which we can intercept those that are not paying us. The system, the financial management system, does have its limitations in terms of intercepting those payments. We do have limitations right now. We have very few scenarios in which we can intercept those payments, but I believe the interoperability is limited overall for the entire city. Some departments are not talking to each other. They're not talking to the controller's office. Other systems are in silo operations. So I think we need to attack that issue first, the issue of communications among the systems, and also creating interfaces within the financial management system so that we could intercept payments, in which cases if you're pulling a permit from building and safety and you do owe business taxes, how do we identify those quickly and rapidly so that the consumer or the constituent is not waiting for a long period of time, and then also making sure that we're operating more efficiently in our operations. So fundamentally I agree we should attack this, and it is on my radar in terms of moving that up in the high priority ladder. I will be providing a report within the next 2 to 3 weeks in terms of where we are with our collections reform, our billing systems. An issue of interoperability will be highlighted in that report as well. I think coming back within the next couple of weeks with a report understanding what we can do, what we cannot do. The survey results are coming in from the departments by the end of this week. We should have the analysis done within the next 2 to 3 weeks, but coming back within the next month to give you a more fuller, broader perspective of what we can do and what limitations the systems we have and what we can do in terms of moving forward that we can capture this in the future.
So if we bring this matter back in, say, 30 days, do you think that you'll all have your analysis sufficiently prepared that you can provide a recommendation as to specific ordinances for specific departments, and that will be the touchstone for a further instruction on ordinances at that point?
I believe we could come back with what we preliminarily identify as the best opportunities that we should pursue, and then use that to initiate those more detailed discussions with those departments. But I think it would be good to also have the support of the council probably at that point so that the departments understand that this is an instruction.
A recommendation coming from this committee to the Office of Finance, ITA controllers, and the CAOs to work together to come up with a plan, an action plan on how we can do intercepts of this sort would be a highly recommended from this committee coming out to the departments.
Well, we really already have that in our budget instruction from the existing budget, but I suppose we could expand to that, and I think expanding it to incorporate these issues of interoperability and other ways that we can do it aside from permit revocation and business license revocation. I think that's appropriate, and if there's no objection to that, I think that should be the instruction of this committee.
One other question.
Mr. Kritz.
Have other cities implemented a similar policy, and if so, what kind of results have they had?
I believe so. I couldn't give you the specifics of that though, but I do know that this has come up from various recommendations to us, and I do believe that those were founded in the basis that this has been implemented in other places. But I couldn't tell you the specific as to the success rates of those.
Well, if there was some way to get that information back along with everything else, I think that would be informative to us.
So why don't we do this then? Why don't we go ahead and approve the motion and instruct the Office of Finance, the CAO, the City Attorney to complete the analysis that you've described and to bring back here a plan within 30 days for a comprehensive set of ordinances to address the problems of delinquent taxes and in both the context of the interoperability issues that have been discussed by Mr. Campos, as well as the revocation model that's included in the budget instructions already. That make sense?
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Okay.
Very good.
All right, that'll be the action of the committee. And that brings us to item number 6.
Item number 6 is a budget motion, Englander Cardenas, instructing CDD, Community Development Department, to identify an additional $50,000 to fund the New Horizons Adult Learning Center expansion project, in addition to any previously authorized Community Development Block Grant Funding Award.
Mr. Englander, did you want to speak to this? Or?
No, just
Okay.
just basically that we're just asking for the department. This is pretty typical to reprogram or look for additional reprogramming of the existing allocations. And
Manny Chavez with CDD, and
yes.
shall I proceed? Or we're actually going through reconciliation of our unexpended CDBG balances at present. We'll complete that exercise by September 14th. And we can come back with a determination of where we would get those $50,000 from.
Right. Excellent. Thank you.
So can we proceed then to include that within the context of the larger reprogramming effort that that CDD is going through, and ask then also with the assistance of the CLA and CAO to identify these funding sources within the context of the larger reprogramming effort that you're going through right now?
Exactly.
And when, how soon will that process be completed?
We hope to have all the reports back to us by the end of this month, and after we do our analysis, we should be done by the 14th of September. That is our goal.
Okay. You'll let me know.
We will.
Okay.
We'll let you know.
And can you then go ahead and report back to this committee on that effort in 30 days?
We will do that.
Very good. Without objection, that will be the action of the committee. And that brings us to public comment. I have not yet received any public comment cards, so public comment is closed. Mr. Strawn, anything else?
Just going back to item 4, just for the clerk, I want to open, we mentioned we were going to the recommendation with the note and file, but I just wanted to ask the committee, do you want to concur with Public Safety Committee to note and file in the full recommendation for public safety? I imagine yes, but just technicality.
How is that different than what we did?
Well, you could have just,
because public safety also had a request for further information regarding
yes, exactly. So this is a small technicality.
Or, yes.
Instead of having 2 separate recommendations, we just concur with Public Safety Committee.
I think that was our intention, so yes, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. That brings us to the end of our business, and we are adjourned.